Zan, zendegi, azadi. Woman, life, freedom. 3 simple words that serve as a declaration of opposition to the misogynistic, murderous, repressive Islamic Republic regime. A manifestation of everyday heroism that has been 44 years in the making. And whilst the Islamic Republic is once again on an international charm offensive, trying to whitewash its image and discredit people like me, like you, I want to keep the focus on the people who really matter. It's been a year since the murder in custody of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman, Mahsa Jina Amini, arrested for inappropriate hijab. Mahsa wasn't just a young woman. She was a member of persecuted ethnic and religious minority groups. Her killing ignited a fervent demand for justice under the banner of woman, life, freedom, the battle cry of the revolutionary protests that shook the foundation of the Islamic Republic and reverberated across the world. While the protests were triggered by women's rights, Mahsa's killing galvanized a broad-based pro-democracy uprising. Today, millions of diverse Iranians recognize that the status of women and girls is inextricably bound to the inclusive democracy they seek. One of those brave Iranians was 16-year-old Nika Shahkarami. She disappeared while protesting just days after Mahsa was killed. Social media footage showed her waving and burning her compulsory hijab while shouting death to the dictator. In her last message to her friend, she said she was being chased by security forces. Her official cause of death, blunt force trauma. Another brave Iranian was 62-year-old grandmother Minu Majidi. Before she joined the protest, she said to her family, "If I don't protest, who will?" She was found with nearly 200 gun pellets in her body. And it's not just women who are protesting. At the onset of the Islamic Republic, few Iranian men stood in solidarity while the regime ransacked the rights of their wives, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters. But in the course of the past year, they have stood alongside the women against the gender apartheid regime that silences everyone who doesn't share its intolerant ideology. In fact, for the past year, the majority of the protesters killed have been young men, like 23-year-old Majid Reza Rahnavard, who, like many young Iranians, was a nationalist and proudly had the lion and sun tattooed on his arm, Iran's historic national symbol. Before they hanged him for enmity against God, they broke that arm. Majid Reza's dying wish was that people didn't cry or read the Quran or pray at his grave. Instead, he wanted people to be joyful and play happy music. Indeed, a yearning for secularism is the natural backlash after half a century of fundamentalist rule. Similarly, the demand for gender equality has only grown stronger with time. Iranian women are among the few in the world who have less rights than their grandmothers did 5 decades ago. At the onset of the regime, the founder, Ayatollah Khomeini, when he seized power in 1979, he didn't just impose the compulsory hijab, he reversed women's rights in marriage, in child custody, and divorce. That included lowering the legal age of marriage for women from 18 to 9. Girls that young can still be married in Iran today. While tens of thousands of Iranian women rose up at the inception of this regime to demand, in opposition to the compulsory hijab, their cries were met with violence and threats. Among the bravest of those women was Dr. Farrukh Parsa, Iran's first female cabinet minister, a pioneer in women's rights, and one of my personal heroes. Before she was executed by firing squad a year after the revolution, she wrote to her children from prison, saying that she would rather face death than live under the shame of forced veil. She wrote, "I refuse to bow to those who expect me to express remorse for 50 years of my efforts for equality between men and women." While Dr. Parsa was a trailblazer of woman life freedom, defeating dictatorship requires millions of micro acts of courage. And 3 generations of unsung heroes have led us to this day. I want to talk to you about 2 such people. Mari was 19 and heavily pregnant when she and her then 29-year-old husband, Mehran, joined the minority of Iranians bravely protesting against the newly forming Islamic Republic. They realized that they couldn't live in that country anymore. Their lives were in danger. So they tried to leave Iran when Mari was 8 months pregnant. But at the airport, Mehran was summoned to the Revolutionary Court. He realized he could very well be executed. And so they escaped Iran soon after their baby was born. Mehran and Mari are my parents. And while they were exiled when I was barely 3 weeks old, their courage inspired me to make it my life's mission to use my freedoms to ensure the Iranian people achieve theirs. Sorry. After 15 years of advocacy, I can tell you this. I've constantly been advised by members of the human rights community that democracy and human rights activism shouldn't be conflated. Here's why I disagree. If the pillars of a system ensure its wrongs cannot be made right, the pillars need to be replaced. And that's exactly what the people of Iran have tried to do nearly once every decade since the inception of the Islamic Republic. The first generation of post-revolutionary youth rose up in the 1999 student protests, otherwise known as Iran's Tiananmen Square. The protests were memorialized on an iconic cover of The Economist magazine, showing my then 20-year-old friend Ahmad Batebi holding the blood-stained T-shirt of an injured student. Because of that photo, Ahmad was tortured and imprisoned for 8 years before he escaped Iran in 2008. A decade later was the Green Movement protests in response to the tainted re-election of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Once again, the regime responded with its sole response, brutality. A video of 26-year-old protester and aspiring musician Neda Agha Sultan became the most witnessed death in human history after she was shot in the chest. And with the advent of smartphones with cameras and social media, the regime couldn't continue killing in the dark. In late 2017, a brave 32-year-old woman named Vida Movahed stood atop a utility box in the middle of Revolution Street and bravely, peacefully waved her white headscarf from the end of a stick. Her courage was contagious, and other women followed in what became known as the Girls of Revolution Street. Dozens of women were arrested. Several received double-digit prison sentences. And then came the Bloody November protests of 2019. What started off as economic protests quickly became political. The regime responded by killing more than 1,500 protesters in less than 2 weeks. And thousands more were arrested, including 27-year-old champion wrestler Navid Afkari. After a tortured confession, Navid released an audio recording from prison, pleading with the international community to save him. He said, "Your silence is supporting the oppressors and the oppression." His execution, in defiance of international outrage, showed yet again this regime's utter contempt for the rule of law. And in the past year, after more than 500 protesters have been killed, dozens more facing the gallows, tens of thousands arrested, and thousands of Iranians blinded, gassed, raped, tortured, forcibly disappeared, the world has moved on. As it seems, the security forces have crushed yet another uprising. But here's what the regime doesn't seem to understand, is that with every injustice, it stokes the flames of resistance. And while this may not currently be reflected on the streets, the revolutionary fire is very much ablaze in the hearts and the minds of Iran's protesters. Journalist Nazila Maroufian continues to defy the regime despite multiple imprisonments, removing her compulsory hijab and sharing a photo with the world every time she is freed. Countless families continue to seek justice for their loved ones despite being harassed, intimidated, imprisoned, including Mahmounir Molaira, the mother of 9-year-old aspiring inventor Kian Pirfalak, who was shot to death by this regime. Mahmounir is currently reportedly under house arrest for daring to hold this regime to account. And dozens of female athletes have competed without compulsory hijab. Recording artists released protest anthems. Prominent actresses protest by removing their compulsory hijab in public, and hundreds of thousands of Iranian women are flouting the compulsory hijab in major Iranian cities as we speak, demanding an end to the Islamic Republic. And with this kind of courage, the time between the ebbs and the flows of these protests will become shorter until this regime is no longer, because woman, life, freedom is not just a viral hashtag. It's a call not only for women's rights, but for accountable, representative government that has incubated for 44 years and is ready to be born. Thank you.